Sat down with Mayfield's son, who believes he's the only one who could write the musician's story by making a movie about his father's story.
We were each other's keepers. We were each other's friends. We were family. Oftentimes we had to sleep in cars because there were no hotels that would allow us to stay in them, even though we had the money to pay.
26 years after his death, Curtis Mayfield's son finally confirms the rumors. Behind the music, Curtis had a violent temper, including shocking incidents of physical assault. From punching Diane in front of family to allegedly being stabbed by his next partner, the stories kept piling up.
That's the ballad singer-songwriter Curtis Mayfield wrote for his love, Diane.
It was about her, she believed.
Add in a tragic accident that left him paralyzed. Whispers began about money troubles, stolen royalties, and shady deals with music industry execs.
We were each other's keepers. We were each other's friends. We were family. Oftentimes we had to sleep in cars because there were no hotels that would allow us to stay in them, even though we had the money to pay.
Some said Curtis was cheated out of millions. Others claimed he was abandoned by the very people who once praised him. Now his son is breaking the silence. Let's uncover the truth. Curtis Mayfield is remembered as one of the greatest voices in soul and funk music. His songs had meaning. They spoke to the struggles, pain, and hopes of Black people in America. Curtis had a smooth voice, powerful lyrics, and deep emotion in his music.
You know, people have a tendency to say that Curtis is perhaps a Black Bob Dylan. I would say that Bob Dylan is perhaps a white Curtis.
Many people saw him as more than just a singer. They saw him as a leader and a voice for change. He used music to fight for civil rights and to talk about the things that others were afraid to say. His songs gave people hope.
We people who are darker than blue.
But behind that strong and loving voice was a man with a very different life, one that wasn't always kind, loving, or faithful. People who knew Curtis closely often say different things about him. Some say he was gentle and always put family first. They describe him as kind, calm, and hardworking. But others say Curtis had another side. They say he could be distant and even cold. He had moods that would change quickly. One moment he was smiling, the next he was angry. These different stories make it hard to fully understand who Curtis really was. Was he a loving man, or was he someone who caused harm behind closed doors? Maybe he was both. The time when Curtis was making music was not easy. The music industry was full of pressure and unfair treatment, especially for Black artists. Many singers were taken advantage of. They were underpaid, overworked, and sometimes treated badly by the people who were supposed to help them. Abuse and mistreatment often happened in private, and people stayed quiet about it. This silence makes it hard to know everything about what happened in Curtis's life and how it affected the people around him. Curtis was living the dream. He was famous, successful, and part of a group called the Impressions.
Say it's all right.
At the same time, America was going through big changes. The civil rights movement was growing.
I was totally one for the movement itself, me being young, gifted, and Black.
I'm tired of marching. Tired of marching for something that should have been mine at birth. I don't mind saying to you tonight.
Black people were fighting for equal rights. Curtis did not stay quiet. He started to write songs that talked about these struggles. He was one of the first to do this. But singing about these problems came with real danger. The Impressions were touring across America, but being a famous Black group didn't protect them from racism.
We were each other's keepers. We were each other's friends. We were family. Oftentimes we had to sleep in cars because there were no hotels that would allow us to stay in them, even though we had the money to pay.
When the Impressions toured the South, they had to deal with many unfair and dangerous situations. They were not allowed to stay in certain hotels because of the color of their skin. In some towns, they had to be careful not to be out after dark. Even though they were doing everything right, they were still at risk just for being black. Living with that kind of fear every day wears a person down. It is easy to understand why Curtis started looking for comfort in other places. During a break from touring, Curtis met a woman named Helen. They started dating and soon became close. But when Curtis went back on the road, he changed. Groupies, women who followed bands around, wanted to be with him. And Curtis gave in. He started cheating on Helen, and once he started, he didn't stop. Curtis had a hard time being faithful. Even when he made the biggest promise of all, he couldn't stay true. Curtis got married to Helen when he was only 17 years old. At that age, he was not ready for marriage. He was too young, too busy with music, and already showing signs of being unfaithful. Curtis and Helen were in love, but it was the wrong time. Still, they got married, and they weren't alone. They had a double wedding with another member of the Impressions, Fred Cash, and his partner Judy. Sadly, neither couple found happiness in marriage. Not long after his wedding, Curtis had a strange and not-so-sweet meeting with another woman named Diane. After a concert, Diane and her friends were almost hit by the group's limo. Curtis stayed in the car while his bandmates got out and gave the girls free tickets for the next show. Curtis didn't seem interested at first, but everything changed the next night. At the next concert, Curtis noticed Diane. He was drawn to her and started talking to her. The two began a secret romance. The problem was that both of them were already married. Diane also had a young child. But their feelings were strong. They wrote letters, talked on the phone, exchanged gifts, and met up whenever Curtis was in town. Their love was exciting, but it was also messy and full of secrets.
That's the ballad singer-songwriter Curtis Mayfield wrote for his love, Diane.
It was about her, she believes.
As Curtis's music career continued to rise, his personal life was falling apart. He and Helen had a child, but it didn't bring them closer. Curtis's heart was no longer with Helen. Diane left her husband, and Curtis thought about doing the same. Finally, he made up his mind. After 3 years of marriage and 2 kids, Curtis left Helen. He wrote a letter to his mother explaining why. He said Diane made him happy while Helen didn't. He wrote that things had happened in the marriage that made him lose love for Helen. He said it wasn't just about him. It was also about the children. He didn't want them growing up in a house where mom and dad were always unhappy. Curtis said he still respected Helen and didn't want to lead her on. He believed she deserved more than just a husband who stayed out of duty. She needed love, kindness, and attention. But the way Curtis handled things after the breakup didn't show much kindness. When Helen asked for money during the divorce, Curtis refused. He didn't want to lose his money. Instead of giving her financial support, he stayed married to her on paper. He never made things official with Diane, but they acted like a family and even had 2 kids together. Curtis adopted Diane's son, too. He tried to be a good father, but as a partner, he failed again. Diane soon learned that being with Curtis was not easy. He bought gifts and did big, showy things for the family, but he didn't do the small, everyday things that mattered. He didn't listen, didn't share his feelings, and didn't support Diane emotionally. At first, she thought he was just quiet and creative, but with time, she saw he was also controlling, moody, and not loyal. Curtis started seeing other women again. One woman wasn't just a fling, he gave her her own apartment. Curtis was living 2 lives, one as a family man with Diane and the kids, and one as a cheater with his mistress. Diane tried to ignore it, but Curtis didn't even try to hide it anymore. Things got worse. One of the women he was seeing got pregnant. Then she called to say she lost the baby. Another time, Diane came home and caught Curtis in bed with someone else. It happened more than once. Diane even knew some of these women. She was hurt and angry, and sometimes she acted out. Diane began driving around with the kids and a friend to confront the women Curtis was sleeping with. The kids stayed outside while Diane and her friend went inside to face the women. Even though the kids didn't understand everything at the time, They could tell that something was wrong. They saw their father act differently around different people. His children noticed Curtis had 3 voices. The first was soft and gentle, like the one he used in his songs. People called him the gentle genius because of it. The second voice was strict and serious, which he used when disciplining them. The third voice was loud and angry, a scream that came out when he argued with women. That third voice scared them the most. One time, Diane got a modeling job. Curtis didn't like that. He rushed home and tried to stop her from going. When she told him she wanted to work and have her own money, he lost his temper. He pulled cash from his pocket and threw it at her. The wind blew the money all over the street. Diane drove off, and Curtis was left picking up the bills from the ground. Curtis's temper didn't just lead to yelling. One time, in front of his brother Kenny, Curtis punched Diane in the stomach during a fight. Diane wanted to call the police, but Curtis's family begged her not to. Sadly, this wasn't the only time Curtis got violent with his romantic partners. Even after Curtis and Diane broke up, he still kept showing up in her life. He moved on to another woman named Tony and called her his spiritual wife, even though he was still legally married to Helen. He continued to visit Diane's home, and one day, while she was bathing their daughter, a man called her on the phone. Curtis got jealous and angry. He grabbed the phone and hung up. He ran to the bathroom and started shouting at Diane. Then, he pulled their daughter from the bathtub, knocked Diane down, and kicked her. He left her with a large bruise on her leg. His new relationship with Tony was no better. Just before things ended with Tony, Curtis was injured badly. Something cut the tendon in one of his fingers, making it hard to play guitar. He told people it was an accident in the kitchen, but his family believed Tony stabbed him. Even though his personal life was always full of pain, confusion, and drama, his music never showed that chaos. On stage, Curtis was a star. Off stage, he was a troubled man. In 1972, something powerful happened in music and film. Curtis made a soundtrack for the movie Superfly.
The big one. This is a chance, and I want to take it. Now.
But this wasn't just any soundtrack. It was deep, emotional, and very real. Isaac Hayes had already opened the door with his music for Shaft.
Damn right.
But Curtis took things further. If Hayes laid the foundation, Curtis built a tall building on it, strong and unforgettable. His music had feeling, truth, and stories that touched people's hearts. The Superfly album was not just background music for a movie. It stood on its own as something very special. Curtis mixed funky beats and cool rhythms with lyrics that spoke about real life on the streets. He didn't try to make things sound sweet or fake. Instead, he told the truth. Songs like Pusherman and Freddie's Dead.
That's what I said.
Gave people a real look into the lives of those struggling with drugs, money problems, and daily survival. These songs were like short movies that you could feel in your heart. People listened and felt like someone finally understood what they were going through. This album was a huge success. In the 1970s alone, it sold over 5 million copies. That was a big deal, especially for a soul artist at the time. It made Curtis Mayfield one of the most respected names in music. People saw him not just as a singer, but as a voice for the people. His music gave power and hope to those who felt left behind. The movie Superfly also carried a lot of weight.
The big one. This is a chance, and I want to take it. Now.
It was the first movie directed by Gordon Parks Jr. His father, Gordon Parks Sr., was already famous as a photographer and for directing Shaft, a popular movie that brought black stories into big theaters. Because of his father's name, Gordon Jr. had high expectations on his shoulders. But he didn't let anyone down. He made a film that stood tall and bold, just like the music that came with it.
Shaft's his name, Shaft's his game.
Listen, Snow White.
The story of the movie was about a man named Priest. Priest was a stylish drug dealer who wanted to leave that life behind. He had a dream of doing one last big drug deal, making $1 million, and then escaping with his girlfriend, Georgia. He didn't want to hustle forever. The movie trailer called it The Big One, and it got people curious. It wasn't just the plot that caught attention. It was how it showed life in the streets, good and bad, beautiful and ugly. But not everyone liked what they saw. Some people were upset about the way drug use was shown in the movie. The characters didn't just talk about cocaine. They used it. It was a major part of the story. Many critics said the film showed black people in a negative way. They believed it helped spread harmful ideas, like the belief that all black communities were full of crime and drugs. This caused a lot of debate, especially because movies and music can shape how people see the world. Curtis didn't agree with the critics. He said his music and the movie were not lies. They were the truth. For Curtis, songs like Pusherman and Freddie's Dead weren't trying to make drug dealing look cool. They were showing the pain, the loss, and the reasons why people made those choices. He believed that instead of blaming the music and films, people should look at the real problems in the world: poverty, racism, lack of good schools, and no job chances. In an interview with Jet magazine in October 1972, Curtis said something powerful. He said, "The way you clean up the films is by cleaning up the streets." That meant, if you don't like what you see in movies or hear in songs, don't attack the artists. Fix the real problems that caused those stories in the first place. He believed art was like a mirror. If you don't like what you see in the mirror, you should try to fix your life, not break the mirror. Curtis was using his music to speak truth and bring attention to problems people were ignoring.
We're all built up with progress, but sometimes I must confess.
Everything seemed to be going well in Curtis's career until a sad and terrible event happened. In August 1990, Curtis was getting ready to perform at an outdoor concert in Brooklyn, New York. While he was being introduced to the audience, something awful happened. A heavy piece of lighting equipment fell from above and hit him. The accident left him paralyzed from the neck down. This meant he could no longer move his arms or legs. This accident was life-changing. Curtis had always been known for his ability to play the guitar and sing with deep feeling. The guitar was like a part of him, and now he could no longer hold it or play it. Many people would have given up after something like this. They would have walked away from music. But not Curtis. Even though his body was broken, his spirit was strong. He decided to keep going. Curtis couldn't play instruments anymore, but he could still think, imagine, and create music in his mind. He started working with other musicians. He would share his ideas and let them help him turn those ideas into songs. It wasn't easy. It took more time and patience. But Curtis kept pushing forward, refusing to let the accident stop his love for music. One amazing moment came when he recorded a remake of his song, Let's Do It Again.
Sweet love in the midnight, good sweet come on in light.
Curtis had to lie down flat on his back to sing because he couldn't breathe properly while sitting up. He found that lying down allowed gravity to help him push air through his lungs. He recorded one line at a time, slowly and carefully. It was hard work, but he did it. That shows just how strong and determined he was. In 1996, Curtis released an album called New World Order.
We got to make a change. It's a brand new day.
It was more than just another album. It was a message. It said, "I'm still here. I still have something to say." He recorded the songs one piece at a time, sometimes taking weeks or even months to finish a single song. But the final result was beautiful. It showed the world that Curtis Mayfield was still a genius, still full of heart, and still standing strong, even if he could no longer stand at all. After the accident that left Curtis Mayfield paralyzed, his life changed in many ways. Even though he kept creating powerful music, life became very hard. One of the biggest problems he faced was money. Curtis could no longer perform on stage like before, which meant he He couldn't earn money through concerts and tours. At the same time, his medical care was very expensive. He needed a lot of help and treatment just to stay alive and healthy. Paying for this care became a huge burden. On top of that, he had to deal with fights over the money he was supposed to get from his music. These were called royalty disputes. It was a sad truth that many black musicians like Curtis were often cheated in the music business. They were given unfair contracts when they were young and excited to become stars. In the past, many black artists signed deals without knowing the long-term cost. These contracts often gave away the rights to their own songs. Curtis was one of the many who fell into this trap. Even though he had written and recorded many hit songs, he did not get all the money he should have. The system often worked against people like him, and he had to fight just to get a piece of what he had earned. This wasn't fair. His music was everywhere, on the radio, in movies, and sampled in new songs. But the money didn't always reach him. He kept trying, though. He never gave up, even when the system seemed stacked against him. Even with all these struggles, Curtis still received love and respect for what he had done. In 1994, he was given the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. This was a big moment for him. It meant the world finally saw how important his music was. He didn't just sing love songs. He sang about real problems in the world. His songs gave people hope. He talked about justice, racism, and standing strong during hard times. His music spoke for those who had no voice. The award proved that his work mattered and would not be forgotten. Sadly, his health got worse with time. By 1998, he had to have his right leg cut off because of diabetes. This was another painful moment in his life. He had already been through so much, but still, Curtis stayed strong. He didn't let the pain break his spirit. He kept inspiring others with his courage. In 1999, he was honored again. This time, he was added to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He was listed with great names like Paul McCartney and Bruce Springsteen. It was another sign that people saw him as one of the best.
For all these reasons and millions more, it is my profound honor to welcome this legend.
Even though he couldn't attend the Hall of Fame ceremony, his music was still being played and celebrated. Before he died, Curtis made one last appearance on a song. It was a track called Astounded by Bran Van 3000. They used pieces of his old recordings, including his famous song, Move On Up. Even though he was very sick, his voice still sounded full of soul. That voice had once changed music, and it still touched people. On December 26, 1999, Curtis Mayfield passed away at the age of 57. He died from problems caused by type 2 diabetes in a hospital in Georgia. Even though he is gone, his music and message live on. Curtis Mayfield will always be remembered as a man who used his voice to make the world a better place.